Ferrari is looking beyond Imola. No major upgrade package is expected at the Enzo and Dino Ferrari circuit, unlike Red Bull and Mercedes, as the team's management has launched a relaunch plan intended to make the SF-25 more competitive later in the year. Not to fight for the championship, but to bring renewed motivation to a team already heavily engaged in designing the 678, the 2026 car that must comply with sweeping regulatory changes. At the Made in Italy and Emilia Romagna GP, aerodynamic tweaks will be introduced, with the new front wing, compliant with stricter deflection rules, set to debut in Spain. Within the racing department, there's confidence that Ferrari will lose less performance than McLaren and Mercedes with this change. However, the most anticipated update involves the rear suspension, which should allow for a more extreme mechanical setup, lowering the rear ride height in a bid to recover missing downforce. It's important to clarify that the overall suspension layout remains unchanged. It was a pull rod system and will continue to be so. Budget restrictions limit Ferrari to targeted interventions, since most of the resources are allocated to the 2026 car, leaving little flexibility for developing the SF-25. Claims that the gearbox casing will be modified are incorrect. There's room to adjust the suspension arm mounts and revise the linkage geometry without changing the transmission housing itself. This bold in-season change could appear on the SF-25 in the second half of June between the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal and the Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring. Ferrari will then have 3 races, in Great Britain, Belgium, and Hungary, before the summer break to assess the effectiveness and impact of the changes, which will be accompanied by aerodynamic updates to the car's rear end. The team is not throwing in the towel and remains committed to the SF-25, which has shown glimpses of potential that have rarely been fully tapped. Both drivers have called for updates to help unlock more performance, particularly Charles Leclerc, who, more than Lewis Hamilton, has adapted to the car and often driven around its problems. He has made it clear that without technical evolution, there's only so much performance to extract. Ferrari is not giving up. After a disappointing start to the season that fell short of high expectations, the team still aims to get back on track and deliver at least partial satisfaction to its fans. The SF-25 performs well in fast sections, but struggles in slower corners. Unfortunately, low-speed sectors make up a larger portion of most circuits, and the need for more downforce is crucial to reducing the persistent understeer common to ground-effect cars. Strong initial turn-in means little if the rear end is unstable and unpredictable, making the SF-25 hard to handle. This also narrows the tire's operating window, often leading to overheating, especially as Pirelli has boldly opted for softer compounds this season. At Imola, for instance, the C6 tire will make its debut, a completely new compound designed specifically for qualifying. This start to the season sees 2 of F1's historic teams living through very different moments. McLaren is currently the best car and is emerging as the only serious contender for the Constructors' Championship, while Ferrari, which hoped to fight for both championships, has taken a dramatic step back with its winter development. From competing for pole positions and wins by the thousandths at the end of last season to losing over a second per lap in Miami, Ferrari is at its lowest point performance-wise at the start of the 2025 season. Based on what we've seen on track so far, there are also parallels to be drawn between the SF-25 and the MCL-39 with past cars, and once again these comparisons only increase the regret for Ferrari. Ferrari has fallen into the same mistakes as Red Bull: complex balance and mechanical deficiencies. In just a few months of development, Ferrari has gone from having strong points in slow corners, traction, and a very solid rear end to having these as absolute weaknesses of the SF-25. The 2025 car is severely lacking in these areas, and the winter revolution that aimed to change 99% of the components, altering the car's structure and implementing an ambitious design, is not yielding the desired results. The main achievement has been making the front end stronger than previous cars, but this is not fully usable due to an unexpectedly weak rear end. This is rooted in significant structural issues, which we've already analyzed, stemming from further extremes in the rear suspension, though still following the pull rod design. However, these have led to undesirable problems. This issue makes it difficult for the engineers to set up the SF-25 within a wide operating window without risking floor wear, which can lead to disqualification, as happened in China. At the start of the race, despite carrying more weight, the car stays higher due to lower cornering speeds. Lowering it increases downforce, but the risk is that with an empty fuel tank and higher speeds, the plank could scrape too much, leading to excessive wear beyond what's allowed. The different height settings are seriously penalizing the SF-25, particularly in terms of downforce, and are preventing it from achieving balance with the front end. The solution to avoid massive understeer is either to lighten the front end, thus losing a strength, or to set up the car with a completely front-heavy balance, resulting in a practically null rear and excessive oversteer. This is the approach taken by Leclerc with all its limits, and which is penalizing Lewis Hamilton instead. Furthermore, the imbalance is significantly hurting Ferrari in slow corners, and the weak rear end deprives the car of what has been a strength for it in the past: traction. This is because the car must run with stiffer setups due to the rear suspension issues, which complicates curb attacks. Ferrari is facing many of the same issues that affected the Red Bull RB20 last season, and though in lesser degree, these problems are still present in the Anglo-Austrian car today. The RB21's balance is still critical, but interventions between Jeddah and Miami have improved the situation slightly, though the problems have not been fully resolved. The SF-25 still carries some defects from the 2024 car, as analyzed earlier, which particularly affect qualifying. The aerodynamics mechanics interaction remains a major limitation for the SF-25, and fixes are not immediate. On top of this, the irony. The McLaren MCL39 has some features reminiscent of Ferrari's F175, from having one of the best cars at the end of 2024 to struggling at the start of 2025, McLaren has surged ahead. But there's more. Looking at the MCL39, one can notice and even see some distinctive features that were characteristic of Ferrari's first ground effect car, the F175 of 2022. The Woking car has more downforce than any other, a good front end, and an excellent rear in terms of traction. Only Mercedes can match it here. It has excellent tire management, runs very low, and has soft setups without excessively wearing the plank. And like the F175, it shares a deficit in straight-line efficiency. That Ferrari, under team principal Mattia Binotto and technical directors David Sanchez and Enrico Cardile, all of whom are now no longer at Maranello, had chosen a bold and different path from others, and it was paying off. The first issues arose with the floor in France, but the F175 ultimately failed as a project with the introduction of TD39 in Spa, which also contributed to the problems in 2023, as the designers initially followed the same development path, convinced they could find countermeasures, only to have to shift to the downwash side, especially in the side pods, starting from the Spanish GP in 2023. McLaren is the only team that has not made a major mistake with an update package since Austria 2023. After an initial deficit at the beginning of 2024, with a delay in winter development from Miami onwards, Andrea Stella's team has made all the right choices. Only in Jeddah was a new diffuser introduced, which was not used and was not seen in Miami, so it will be interesting to see if it reappears in Imola, paired with other new components, or if it has been definitively discarded. Rivals point to McLaren's tire management as its strength. They quickly get them working in qualifying and manage them better than anyone else in the race, especially as the asphalt temperatures rise. The three competing teams, Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari, can only keep pace with McLaren for brief moments, but it's McLaren's consistency that creates the significant gaps we see. Such an advantage raises suspicions, especially from Milton Keynes, where they are familiar with Rob Marshall's extreme ideas. Could TD19 in Barcelona be an opportunity? Technical directives sometimes hit the mark. Other times their impact is much less noticeable. In 2022, as we've already said, one such directive ruined Ferrari's competitiveness.